Something else in regard to Israel, much more serious, of course, is the fate, the humanitarian fate of people there in Gaza, how they're being treated by Israel, whether aid is getting in, and Israel's ambassador was summoned to the Foreign Office this afternoon and was given a dressing down. There was a joint statement last night. I haven't seen as strong a statement, I must say, a joint statement between the UK, France and Canada warning of sanctions, and the UK announcing today it's suspending trade talks. And of course they summoned the ambassador. Israel has a statement which I'll read in a second, but there's a clip from Keir Starmer on this. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
But first, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say something about the horrific situation in Gaza, where the level of suffering, innocent children being bombed again, is utterly intolerable. Mr. Speaker, over the weekend we coordinated a response with our allies, as set out in my statement with President Macron and Prime Minister Carney last night. And I want to put on record today that we're horrified by the escalation from Israel. We repeat our demand for a ceasefire as the only way to free the hostages. We repeat our opposition to settlements in the West Bank. And we repeat our demand to massively scale up humanitarian assistance into Gaza.
Well, a spokesman for the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said, following the UK's announcement that it will suspend free trade agreement negotiations with Israel and impose sanctions on settlers, even prior to today's announcement, the free trade agreement negotiations were not being advanced at all by the current UK government. More than that, the agreement would serve the mutual benefit of both countries. If due to anti-Israel obsession and domestic political considerations, the British government is willing to harm the British economy, that is its own prerogative. The sanctions against residents of Judea and Samaria are unjustified and regrettable, especially at a time when Israel is mourning yet another victim of Palestinian terror, Tisla Gez, of blessed memory, who was murdered on her way to the delivery room. Doctors continue fighting for her newborn's life in hospital. The British mandate, the Israelis say, ended exactly 77 years ago. External pressures will not divert Israel from its path in defending its existence and security against enemies who seek its destruction. Well, Jotam Confino is Israel correspondent for the Telegraph. A very, very strong exchange of words there between your country and my country, Jotam. How do you assess this?
It's been a long time coming. I'm not surprised, and I'm also not surprised about Prime Minister Netanyahu's reaction. It would be weird if he backed down just because Keir Starmer told him to do that. Netanyahu is banking on Keir Starmer, Macron, and the Canadians bluffing. He has already lifted the blockade into Gaza. 100 trucks with aid came into Gaza today, and he's hoping that this will be enough for them, not just those 100 trucks, obviously, but in the coming days, that the more aid that comes into Gaza will be enough for them to back off on their threats. Now, but it's a game he's playing, because we don't know. We don't know where they're going to go. Maybe Keir Starmer has other plans, and if you start sanctioning Israel along with Macron and Canada and other countries, they'll have huge repercussions for Israel's economy.
What do you make of the fact that Canada and France being allies on this, not really that surprised? I was slightly surprised that the three of them got together for this statement. What's been the reaction in Israel?
Look, Israel feels like the world is ganging up on them. I would say that many Israelis understand why, because they don't share Netanyahu's view on how to handle the war in Gaza. So many Israelis understand this. Many Israelis are dumbstruck when they hear ministers in Netanyahu's cabinet saying the most insane things that are basically giving ammunition to all the anti-Semites out there, but also to people saying you're committing war crimes. When you have a minister saying, let's wipe out all of Gaza, let's throw 2 million people out of there, that's just horrendous. So I would say people in Israel are angry with the world, but they're certainly angry with the government, because essentially Israel has every right to continue to try and get the hostages out, either through war or through negotiations. But it's not okay, obviously, to starve people and to hold aid. It's just an own goal. You're just destroying people's lives in Gaza, but you're also destroying Israel's reputation in the international system.
When do you think this sort of tipping point came here? I mean, we've seen action by Britain. I haven't seen a statement like that, certainly since the 7th of October, or indeed before then. Why do you think this is happening now? Obviously, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is absolutely dreadful. There are starving people there, innocent civilians, and actually quite a number of people, and maybe you could tell us about this as well, standing up against Hamas. Quite a number of protests with many people, despite the fact that a number of people previously in smaller protests had been executed, tortured and brutalized by Hamas.
Look, many of these countries look to the United Nations to get an assessment of what the situation is like in Gaza. The United Nations has a tendency to cry wolf often, and to predict or warn about things that are never actually materializing. But in this situation, not having aid coming into Gaza since early March, eventually you reach a point where you will get starvation. And I think this is the tipping point that everyone has agreed that, all right, we're actually here. Even Netanyahu said, well, we can't have images of famine coming out. So the fact that he's beginning to realize it, Donald Trump said that there's going to be starvation. I think that gave all of these countries the green light to say, well, let's go hard now on Israel.
Jotam, thank you again. That's Jotam Confino there, who is the Telegraph's man in Israel. He's also the author of Netanyahu's Israel, Rise of the Far Right, which is very proudly on my bookshelf, a signed copy. Colonel Simon Diggins is a military and defence analyst. He's obviously a former senior officer in the army. Simon, this is a real nadir of relations between our country and Israel in recent years, isn't it?
No, I think it is. Peter, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I was also very interested what Jotam said about the reaction within Israel itself, and we had the kind of spokesman, if you like, bouncing back on the rhetoric. What's also interesting, worth noting, is the way in which the US is responding at the moment. The US is clearly a key supporter of Israel, as indeed most of us have been over many years. But on his recent tour of the Middle East, President Trump very clearly did not go and visit Israel. He visited all the countries around, but did not go there. Vice President Vance was supposed to visit Israel this week and has refused to do so as well, and has made some excuse for not going. There's a sense in which Israel has been isolated by people who in the past have always been its strongest allies. The Israelis were not consulted over the ceasefire with the Houthis, or indeed with President Trump's conversation with the Iranians about their nuclear program. So there's a sense now, I think, that hasn't existed up until now, that Israel, if it does decide to conduct its imminent invasion or its potential invasion into Gaza, will be completely on its own. People are not prepared to stand by them and stand alongside them.
Is there a sense, I mean, my frustration as someone who absolutely 100% believes that Israel has a right to exist, I want people to live in peace there. If there's a two-state solution in the future, great. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But, I mean, it's frustrating, isn't it, for people? And I know you're, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Simon, but I know you're someone who feels roughly the same way. And essentially you want to say, let's get this sorted. But Israel, the Israeli government, not the Israeli people, but the Israeli government, in my sense of this, is they are their own worst enemy here. They're handing a propaganda victory to Hamas here because they're starving children, innocent civilians who've done nothing wrong in Gaza at the moment. There are incursions into the occupied territories as well. This is a terrible situation for the people who live in Gaza, and Israel is not making it better. It's making it slightly better by putting some aid in, but at the same time, if you want to defeat Hamas, if you want to get the hostages back, I'm not sure what the game plan is here, and I'm not sure Netanyahu does either. Do you, Simon?
No, I don't. I'm not clear myself. I think there's always been two issues. One is an absolutely legitimate response to the horrific Hamas attack. And the murder of all the innocent Israelis and then the hostage taken, absolutely legitimate and completely correct in what they did. But there's always been a slight sense that there's been another agenda running there, which is all about making sure that there can be no two-state solution by effectively ensuring that the one element of it, the Gaza, is effectively removed. And when you've got the equivalent of our Chancellor of Exchequer, you have Minister Smotrich talking about effectively the elimination of Gaza as a place. And he's sitting in the cabinet. I mean, I can't imagine a situation where our Chancellor is briefing one way and the Prime Minister is briefing another way.
The beauties of the very strange coalition that Netanyahu has had to assemble, and actually Yotam's book is largely about that. Simon, can I ask you about something else, actually, which is fury as army chiefs have banned troops from supporting veterans who many people say have been betrayed. This is largely in relation to Northern Ireland, but there are other conflicts as well where veterans veterans are being pursued legally through legal routes, and there is a sense of a war on our boys and girls who have done what they were told previously. Some of them, of course, have broken the law and should be brought to justice, but army chiefs are saying that current troops should not be expressing opinions on this. What do you make of that, especially as someone who has commanded many in the army yourself?
Absolutely, and I'm a strong supporter of the petition that's currently running at the moment, a parliamentary petition, to actually stop this lawfare, one of the original sponsors for this. I mean, it's absolutely shameful, and I think this is what the army chiefs, and indeed all the chiefs now need to recognise, because the government is currently coming for the Northern Ireland veterans, but the mechanism they're using would I regard an abusive extension of the ECHR and the Human Rights Act. They're coming for you next. So you've got to stop this now. We've got to stop this persecution. When our soldiers deployed and fought and operated in Northern Ireland, they did so under law. Now, no doubt along the line, a couple of people may have.
You have 300,000 people serving in uniform. There will be some bad people in that 300,000. No doubt about it.
You're talking probably less than one hand in terms of the numbers. But effectively, what the government has allowed the courts to do is have open season. All our operations to Northern Ireland were according to the law, and even special force operations that were specifically signed off by the Chief Constable of Northern Ireland and by the General Officer Commanding. If they shot somebody, a coroner's inquest took place. In other words, law before the operation, law on the operation, and law afterwards. And what the government is proposing to do is to pull the plank out from underneath that, expose our veterans, and not just the veterans now, but our future veterans. It's shameful that I'm afraid that our army chiefs have chosen to stop them from signing. I urge all of your listeners, please, Peter, and I've sent it to your producer. I've put the petition asked it to be put up on your website. We need to stop this. We need to stop this, not just for the veterans, and I'm a Northern Ireland veteran, but for all our serving soldiers now and for the future as well. I'm really passionate about it. It's really got to me, and I'm forgiving the emotions come out as well.
That's okay. That's absolutely fine. It's perfectly understandable in the circumstances. And as someone whose life was protected by the armed forces, someone who grew up in peace because of their incredible contribution to the peace process in Northern Ireland, which is often forgotten, I can completely understand those thoughts. I'd love to talk to you a bit more about that in future, but for the moment we'll have to leave it. That is Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins, a military and defence analyst. Thank you to him.